Carl Jung uncovered a psychological reality so disturbing that it wasn't just about empathy, it was about what happens when the empath finally decides to choose themselves. For years, highly sensitive people with strong feeling functions live for others, absorbing pain, meeting needs, smoothing conflicts. They become the reliable comforter, the safe space, the one who always bends. But in this endless accommodation, something vital gets buried, their own authentic self. Jung observed that one day, often without warning, such individuals face a breaking point. He called it a turning of the soul, the moment of self-choice. They are forced to decide, continue abandoning themselves for the comfort of others, or reclaim the life they were meant to live. This moment is not gradual. It comes like a crisis, a shock to the system. Jung described it as individuation acceleration, a sudden eruption of authenticity long suppressed. The story of one of his patients reveals the depth of this transformation. The patient had lived decades as an accommodating, gentle, endlessly giving soul. In every relationship, they yielded. In every conflict, they disappeared. But after years of therapy, they made the choice to put their own psychological well-being first. What Jung witnessed in the following weeks astonished him. The patient's persona of helpfulness and sacrifice began to dissolve like a mask slipping away. In its place, real personality emerged, desires, opinions, boundaries, creativity. It was like watching a butterfly claw its way out of a cocoon it had mistaken for its natural skin. But with this rebirth came collapse. Family members, once comfortable in their dependence on the patient's endless giving, turned against them. Accusations of selfishness, guilt trips, emotional blackmail, all surged forth. Jung realized that this was not simply one person's transformation, but the exposure of hidden contracts that underpinned entire relationships. The love the patient had trusted for years was revealed to be conditional, based not on who they were, but on how much of themselves they were willing to abandon. For Jung, this was the disturbing truth. When empaths finally choose themselves, they often discover which relationships were built on genuine care and which were fueled by exploitation. The system of accommodation collapses, and in its ruins the real architecture of human connection is revealed. Jung described this system as a psychological imbalance, a distortion of the feeling function. Empaths, in their attempt to preserve love, grow brilliant at reading others while remaining strangers to themselves. He noted 3 layers in this imbalance. The first is external validation, worth measured entirely by the approval of others. The second is shadow accumulation. The piling up of suppressed needs, which later erupt as depression, anxiety, or physical illness. The third is compensatory individuation. When the dam finally breaks, the psyche rushes to bring all the lost pieces of self into consciousness at once, creating both terror and liberation. And it is here that the empath encounters the most devastating weapon of all, guilt. Jung called it the empath's hidden chain. He observed 3 recurring forms. Betrayal guilt, believing that setting boundaries is cruelty, that self-care is selfishness. Identity guilt, feeling that without the role of caretaker, they no longer know who they are. And worthiness guilt, the conviction that their value lies only in usefulness, that claiming a life of their own is undeserved. Jung noticed how others, often unconsciously, weaponized this guilt. The moment an empath set boundaries, those around them would tighten the chains with words like, "You've changed. You're not the same anymore. You're becoming selfish." And too often, the empath mistook guilt for conscience, slipping back into old patterns of sacrifice. For Jung, the crisis was clear. When the empath finally chooses themselves, they stand at the edge of 2 paths, one leading to authentic individuation, the other back into self-abandonment disguised as virtue. When the empath makes the choice to reclaim themselves, the journey ahead is both liberating and dangerous. Jung observed that not every empath walks the same road. Some take small steps, others leap into crisis, while a few discover balance almost immediately. But the choice always marks the beginning of transformation. Jung described 4 distinct patterns. Some become the gradual boundary builders, making quiet, steady changes over time, learning to say no without destroying all their relationships. They are the ones who practice conscious accommodation, choosing when to help rather than living in automatic sacrifice. Others become crisis catalysts, forced into transformation by an event so overwhelming that their old identity collapses overnight. These empaths face the most upheaval, but they also experience the most dramatic rebirth, because there is no going back. A third group Jung called boundary specialists. They develop an almost surgical skill in distinguishing their emotions from the emotions of others, their needs from the demands placed on them. They can feel deeply without drowning. And finally, there are the authentic integrators, the rare souls who reach the heart of individuation, able to be both deeply empathic and fully themselves. These are the ones who show that empathy does not vanish when the self is honored, it expands, renewed and sustainable. But Jung also warned of dangers along this path. For many empaths, the first terror is identity dissolution. When your entire self-image has been built on being the helper, the giver, the one who never says no, then who are you when that mask falls? This collapse can feel like death itself, driving some back into self-abandonment rather than face the unknown. The second danger is the social earthquake. When empaths stop sacrificing, entire relationship systems shake. Some people respond with anger, others with guilt tactics, and some with outright rejection. The empath is left standing in ruins, questioning whether growth is worth the loss. Then comes guilt paralysis. The weight of empathic guilt can feel unbearable, as if every act of self-care is a violation of morality. Without guidance, this guilt can spiral into depression or anxiety. And finally, Jung warned of the overcorrection. The empath who, after years of being exploited, swings to the opposite extreme, becoming hardened, closed, defensive. They protect themselves, yes, but at the cost of losing the very sensitivity that was their gift all along. To prevent these dangers, Jung developed methods for empathic individuation. First, shadow integration. He taught that empaths must reclaim what they had buried: healthy selfishness, legitimate anger, personal desire. These were not flaws, but vital aspects of wholeness. Second, conscious boundaries. Jung emphasized that boundaries are not walls, they are membranes that allow connection without exploitation. Saying no without apology, recognizing manipulation, choosing compassion over compulsion, these practices protect empathy rather than diminish it. Third, authentic voice recovery. After years of silencing their own preferences, empaths must learn to speak again. At first, it may be small, a choice of food, an honest opinion, a creative expression. But each act of truth builds confidence in their right to exist as themselves. And finally, relationship reconstruction. Jung insisted that true connection requires reciprocity. Any relationship that demands endless sacrifice is not love, but dependency. Healthy bonds respect boundaries, support individuality, and encourage growth. Jung's studies revealed both success stories and tragic failures. Some, like Carl Rogers, transformed empathy into structured healing. Rogers did not abandon sensitivity, he protected it through professional boundaries, showing that empathy thrives when it is contained. Others, like Eleanor Roosevelt, turned personal pain into social leadership, channeling empathy into justice rather than self-erasure. But Jung also saw failures. He watched empaths who shut down completely, terrified that any sensitivity would drag them back into exploitation. These individuals lost not only their old patterns, but their capacity for connection, leaving them empty. Others became guilt recyclers, caught in endless cycles of boundary attempts followed by surrender. Mistaking guilt for morality, sacrifice for love. For Jung, the larger significance was cultural. He believed that when empaths choose themselves, they force evolution in the social systems around them. No longer available as emotional shock absorbers, they compel families, communities, even entire societies to grow up. Their individuation becomes a model, proof that sensitivity and strength can coexist, that love does not require self-abandonment, that boundaries make empathy sustainable. At the end of this journey lies what Jung called the return to wholeness. Here, empathy is no longer unconscious absorption, but conscious compassion. Care is no longer driven by fear of rejection, but offered freely, from abundance. The empath discovers that sensitivity was never the enemy. The true enemy was the absence of boundaries that allowed their gift to be exploited. And so, when the empath finally chooses themselves, they do not lose connection, they gain it. They are no longer trapped in savior-victim cycles, but free to experience authentic love, where giving and receiving are balanced. They become beacons, showing others that empathy with self-respect is not weakness but power. This was Jung's final insight, that choosing yourself is not betrayal. It is the deepest act of integration, the moment when the fragmented soul returns to its center. The empath who protects their gift with boundaries shines brighter, not dimmer. And in that light, we see what individuation truly means, not the death of empathy, but its transformation into something conscious, renewable, and profoundly human.